Hello, welcome back to the HoopBall YouTube channel. We are back for another Monday edition of What to Watch For, a fantasy basketball pregame show. I'm your host, Alan Strokey, joined by my co-host, Brent Carlson, the middleman. How you doing, Brent?
Hey, everyone. How you doing? Thanks, Alan, for having me again today. Let me get my earpiece in. That helps if I can hear you. And ready to rock.
Well, yeah, we've got a light Monday card today, so we will breeze through. If you guys are new to the channel, your first time checking this out, basically what we do here, Brent and I will go through all the games that are on docket for tonight and highlight just, very quickly the noteworthy fantasy trends that you need to be making note of, whether it's for waiver wire guys or guys that are already on rosters who are on heaters or cold spells. What would it be? Whatever it is, what we know, you guys will know. And if you like this stuff and you want to see some of the other stuff at the YouTube channel that we have here at HoopBall that we're churning out, drop a like on the video. Please subscribe. Helps us all out in the long run and can let us continue to do cool stuff like we've been doing with these shows and instant fantasy reaction and whatnot. And of course, you can follow Brent and I at our Twitter handles down below. And there we go, right there, the mirror effect. And yeah, that's going to be it. So without further ado, we are going to dive into our first game tonight. Chicago Bulls visiting the Houston Rockets. On the Bulls side of things, there's no new injuries to update with. We continue to be without Lauri Markkanen and Otto Porter Jr. And as far as what we're watching, is mostly just Thad Young, who has been on one hell of a heater over his last month or so. Mostly he stepped into a larger role without Wendell Carter Jr., who has since returned from a quad injury, and those two that I mentioned previously. And he's about at 24 minutes per game over his last three with Wendell Carter back in the fold. But what's noteworthy with him is that he continues to be a hub offensively. A lot of playmaking is coming out of Thad these days. It's really elevated his fantasy value. In his last three games with Wendell Carter back in the lineup, he's averaging 13 points, 8 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and a steal and a block. And we just want to see if he can maintain that very productive pace in only 24 minutes a night, which is possible. I'm mostly interested, though, to see what this team looks like when those other two are back in the fold, Lauri and Otto Porter, whether or not Thad's going to continue to not only play this much, but be as involved as he is in the passing game, because that's really what's elevated him of late. What about you, Brent? Is anyone on Chicago interesting that I didn't mention?
No, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately for Chicago, not a lot of fantasy studs there, but Thad Young has definitely been one of those guys who kind of has risen to the occasion with the injuries and the opportunity. So, make sure he's not available in any leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he is must roster for sure. Then we'll just go on to the Houston side of things, where we have DeMarcus Cousins ruled out with a heel issue and other things in the news that, Brent, I know you touched on this over the past weekend. Maybe that's playing into this absence today. And then Victor Oladipo is also out with a right foot strain. So take it away, Brent. What do we have?
Yeah, so, look for another big game from John Wall. Look for another big game from Jae'Sean Tate. Those are the two guys from a fantasy perspective that you really can count on. Otherwise, with the Rockets, it's sort of a mix of guys who will step up with them out. Eric Gordon probably being the top of the bottom. Daniel House, could be a decent streamer here. But other than that, you're on shaky fantasy ground past that point. Jae'Sean Tate should be owned everywhere. I think he holds value even once Wood is back, since Cousins will be gone. And Oladipo just can't seem to stay healthy, and the Rockets are going to be resting him for next year quite a bit. Wall's going to get rest, which is going to just open up time for Tate, who gets time at all five positions. So anytime somebody's out, Tate's going to be get extra usage and scoring. And he's been great. I think he'll be good all year.
Agreed, totally. Jae'Sean Tate's at the top. He's definitely must roster in my mind, especially with the DeMarcus Cousins news. Without Cousins, too, we're just going to see a ton of PJ Tucker at center. I'm watching that center rotation specifically, with maybe Tate getting some minutes there, Daniel House maybe getting some minutes there, and then Justin Patton, who has yet to play for the Rockets, but they just signed him to a 10-day recently. I'm not expecting anything really out of him, mostly just from a fantasy perspective, but I'm curious if he plays tonight, and if he does, how many minutes. Chicago is obviously very equipped to go small with Thad Young at center, so maybe we'll just see a ton of small ball between both sides. But yeah, I think that's about covers it for the Rockets.
Yep.
So next game on the docket, we have the Memphis Grizzlies visiting the Dallas Mavericks, who the Mavericks have not played in over a week with all the weather. 2-game week last week, and that both were postponed due to the weather going on in Texas. So we'll start on the Grizzlies side of things. This team cannot seem to field a completely healthy roster for one single game. A lot of guys came back that missed their previous one, but we are still without Dylan Brooks in this one, sore right thigh. He has been ruled out. Brandon Clark, though, with a thigh issue, has been ruled in. So I believe Brooks is the only guy who's not going to be playing in tonight's game, and he's a big piece of the puzzle. He's a starter, and he's playing over 30 minutes every game. And primarily, we're going to be watching the wing rotation, small shooting guard and small forward. On the small forward side, Justice Winslow made his Grizzlies debut after being traded to the Grizzlies all the way back last year. He made his first appearance, played 21 minutes in his first game with the Grizzlies. We're watching him, see what kind of role is afforded to him. He's more of a points league target to me than a 9-category leagues target because the percentages have always been very rough. The turnovers have been pretty high, and he doesn't hit the 3 consistently enough. But the rebounds and assists and steals, those are all very appealing and stuff that he can bring to the table. I'm just curious the Grizzlies have a reason to see what they have in him. I mean, because he was he's still young and he's still got upside, particularly at the small forward position, which I wouldn't consider to be figured out for the future for Memphis. And what impact does that have on Kyle Anderson? When this whole team is healthy, Anderson's been getting a lot of minutes at small forward and power forward too. But then at the power forward spot, he's competing with Brandon Clark. He's competing with Xavier Tillman. Whereas, small forward, he's been able to get a nice chunk of minutes. But if you have another guy there, what's left for him? Anderson missed the last game that Winslow debuted in, so remains to be seen how those two interact with each other. And I'm also just watching the shooting guards spot where DeAnthony Melton's got that really sky high appeal. Grayson Allen does not, and he sees the majority of the minutes of that share of guards. They all seem to be in tonight. DeAnthony Melton, Grayson Allen, Jan Konchar, and Desmond Bane. So what does that rotation look like? Are any of them going to step above the fray? I mean, if it's Grayson Allen, then I'm not really interested in anyone. But if it's DeAnthony Melton, there's a lot of upside there. So that's the big stuff for Memphis.
Yeah, I mean, spot on with Memphis there. I mean, a lot of question marks, and we really can't predict what's going to happen until we just see how it plays out with everybody healthy. I think ultimately Winslow does hurt Anderson, who has been like a top 30 player for the last 2 weeks. When he's played. If you're an Anderson owner, you hang on to him, you keep riding it because he's been solid. I think, ultimately he will start to lose time to Winslow, but Winslow can fill in at all of these positions. Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to kind of hurt everybody. He's going to be a thorn in the side of everyone. I think they're going to try to get him a lot of playing time to see what they have with him once he's up to full speed. Because his upside is definitely better than a lot of those guys that we listed from a fantasy and from a real life perspective. So I think they want to see what they got there with Winslow. So I would expect him to cut into a bunch of people's time. You're right at the shooting guard spot. I mean, Melton's the only guy that's appealing at all. But I'm worried that, he's going to lose a lot of value with all these guys healthy. I mean, Agreed. He could get you steals and threes, but I could see Melton hitting a lot of waiver wires pretty soon. He's already hit waiver wires in quite a few of my leagues, and I've been hesitant to even try to go and pick him up just because I don't know how it's going to shake out.
It's a very good point about Winslow, too, about the positional versatility with him makes him a threat to everyone in particular as far as playing time is concerned. It's just that Memphis they got too many young, interesting guys that they want to find time for, and he's just another one as a part of that mix. But yeah, spot on there. Well, let's go to the Dallas side of things.
Yeah, so with Dallas, I mean, the main injuries are Porzingis and Richardson. It looks like Richardson's going to play tonight. I show him as probable. I don't have do you have an update on Porzingis? I'm not sure if he
still questionable from what I've seen. Yeah, still questionable, but I'll take another look real quick while you go here.
Yeah, that's the last I heard too. So, I mean, as far as Dallas goes, the only guys from a fantasy perspective that have been a little bit interesting that might be available out there. Finney Smith has played pretty well and might make a decent streamer. Otherwise, I mean, it's just the regular guys. Richardson has been borderline droppable most of the year. I mean, he's he has too much upside, I think, to cut him right now, but he's really testing my patience with him. I have him in a bunch of leagues, but between the injuries and this COVID thing and his play, he's been really tough to hold on to. So I'll give him a couple more games and see how he does. But he's right on that cut edge for me, which is unfortunate. I had high hopes for him this year in that Dallas offense. But I think really, Finney Smith is the only one that's a surprise potential streamer for me.
I like that tag. Dorian Finney-Smith has been pretty productive in like a subtle way, kind of like a Royce O'Neal type. Doesn't score a whole lot, but he does get involved in all those peripheral stats. By the way, Porzingis is still questionable as of right now. So just so we're all on that same page there. And then, that's you hit everything that I'm watching for. I will be keeping one eye on the center rotation, but I don't know if Porzingis is not playing tonight, then it's going to be tough to get long-term insight on that tonight. Yeah. But before the Mavs were out, we were kind of watching the Maxi Kleber, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Dwight Powell dynamic. If any of those three would break loose and play big minutes, because I'd say Kleber and Powell have interesting fantasy upsides if they're seeing enough time. But it's kind of a mixed bag at the moment. Yeah,
and it's really a matchup base rotation, which is the most frustrating thing from a fantasy, because you really can't predict. I mean, you could kind of guess based off the matchup, but sometimes there's other things going on that we're not privy to that the coaching staff determines is a better matchup.
Especially with Rick Carlisle. That man has, like Eric Spoelstra, he's a very fickle with his rotations at times.
Yep. Like you could say, it's a big team, so Willie Cauley-Stein and Kleber are going to play a lot next to each other, so they'll probably get more minutes. But then, maybe they don't view Kleber as someone to guard big guys. It's more of a stretch. And so it's really hard to tell what they're going to do night to night. Kleber's the only guy that in dynasty leagues and in deeper leagues I'm keeping and hanging on to, because his upside of threes and blocks is really nice. Mm-hmm. But that rotation is just frustrating right now.
Yeah, and Memphis has got plenty of different directions that they can go as far as size matchup is concerned. So it'll be interesting to see how Dallas responds to that in this game. But no one clear that we can recommend. Moving on, we'll go to the Heat visiting the Oklahoma City Thunder on Miami. It's sort of the same deal. There's Goran Dragic continues to be out with his sprained left ankle. Tyler Hero, as of right now, is questionable with a hip issue that he suffered in Miami's last game. So if Hero is out, his minutes are going to be spread out a little bit. You'll see a little bit more go to Kendrick Nunn, who's already seeing a big boost without Dragic. You'll see some go to Max Strus, who sort of jumped into some small minutes in the rotation last game. And they might trickle down to Kelly Olynyk, too, who also got a small bump without Hero. And it's really, for me, it's the Kelly Olynyk dynamic that I'm watching. He is the guy in Miami who is probably floating around on your waiver wire. I imagine Kendrick Nunn is rostered in a whole bunch of places just because he scores a lot, whereas Olynyk gets his stuff done through the rebounding, high efficiency generally, and with 3-pointers and some a little bit of assists here and there. The minutes were something that I was watching closely last week, as it looked like a rookie Precious Achiuwa was sort of cutting into his time a little bit. We saw Olynyk not being able to clear the 25-minute mark over a couple of games. Like I just mentioned with Rick Carlisle, Eric Spoelstra is he tends to like to mix things up in the front court. Olynyk specifically, I'm sure you've had those moments, Brent, where you took a look at Olynyk for a period of time, and then Spoelstra is just like, I don't think so anymore. DNP, coach's decision. He's not there right now. Olynyk's pretty cemented in the rotation, but he needs to be above 25 minutes in my mind to have 9-category standard league value. So just watching his minutes load tonight, and if he can sort of fix the efficiency from the last couple of games have been a little rocky there.
Yeah, I have picked up Olynyk in a few places a couple weeks ago and have been riding that rocky road for the couple weeks. But for the most part, it's been good. There's only been a couple of scary minutes issues here and there. It would be nice to see him consistently get the 25 minutes, but he's the type of guy from a fantasy perspective who can produce pretty good stats in a limited time, just because he does seem to shoot when he gets it. He's not deferring to other players too often, and he does get rebounds and some of those big man stats too that you like to see. So I'm high on Olynyk. I think, his potential's there. I think he's worth owning right now. But yeah, keep an eye on it as the season goes on. As long as they're competitive, I think Achua gets held off. But as soon as, if they continue to play badly and fall kind of out of it in the second half, I think Achua is going to get a lot more time just to see what he's got. But yeah, I agree with you totally on the rest of the Heat there. I think maybe Robinson gets some extra run if Hero's out and a lot of extra shots. So Robinson's a guy who may have hit waiver wires in your league, who's probably worth picking up as a threes specialist because he seems to be heating up.
Good point. Yeah.
And then, so you want to jump over to the Oklahoma City Thunder side. I guess the big news with them is Horford is going to sit tonight. So, so adjust your lineups accordingly. That means Roby's probably going to get big minutes like he usually does when that happens. The other big fantasy story I think out of Oklahoma is Theo Maledon is back. And he seems to be getting as many minutes as he can handle too. So if you need steals, threes, he's a great ad. I picked him up in a few places. I'd almost want to go with him over Melton just because of the playing time is there for Maledon. And I don't think Hill's anywhere near coming back
probably not. Even
when he does, Oklahoma's trying to get young. So they really have no incentive to keep Maledon off the floor at this point. So, see if he's available in a number of your leagues. Otherwise, all the other guys, it's sort of, they rotate who's having a good game. So it's really those other players on the team. But, that's where I'm sit from a Thunder side. How about you, Alan?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Theo Maledon for me. Like you said, he seems to be locked in. I agree that he's a better speculative pickup than DeAnthony Melton because his role – I'd say is far more guaranteed than Melton's. He is locked into the starting lineup next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So he's going to, I think that the thing we'd like to see out of him add to his game is maybe more of a facilitating aspect. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is pretty much the point guard there, even though we've seen Theo Maledon play some playmaking roles for small stretches. But without the assists, he's mostly a threes and steals specialist. And he can be pretty good at those two categories. We've seen some prolific output out of him in that regard before. But then otherwise, we're just continuing to, outside those two in the Isaiah Roby stream, we continue to just keep our eyes on Darius Baisley's efficiency, Lou Dort's efficiency. Those guys I know have been pretty hotly contested topics as far as should I keep holding on to this guy in a 12-team setting? Where with Baisley, I'd say he's my preference between those two because the stat set's so varied with him. The efficiency's awful. And it makes it really tough to rely on in 9-category leagues. But the opportunity's not going anywhere still. I mean, it's just kind of a matter of once it all clicks for him. Because he didn't play all that much last year. He's not really a rookie, but he's never obviously seen the role that he has right now. So just keeping an eye on him, just long-term, that development. If you have a need for his varied stat set, then he's definitely a guy worth rostering. But if you can't handle the efficiency hit that he will take on you on both percentages, then it's kind of tough.
Yeah, there's probably more consistent options out there on the waiver wire that are going to do just as good for you and not hurt you as much in categories. But definitely in dynasty leagues, he's someone I'd like to roster.
Same. Yeah, definitely in dynasty formats. He's got a bright future ahead of him. So next game on the docket, we will go to the Portland Trailblazers visiting the Phoenix Suns. Portland side, no new injuries. CJ's out, Nurk is out. And Harry Giles is out with a calf issue. And it's around his injury that I want to hone in on here because without him, Portland has no real backup center. They've cobbled it together with Robert Covington and Derrick Jones Jr. mostly. And it's been great for both of those guys. I've been very vocal about the Robert Covington boost in this regard, seeing backup center minutes. The rebounds have been up for him. The blocks are nuts. They're just nuts right now. He has 14 in his last 3 games, which is he had 14 total on the year heading into those 3 games. So already doubling that output. I'd say that the more minutes he plays there, the more likely it is that he continues to block shots at that rate. And that's having an effect on Derrick Jones Jr. as well. He's also getting some backup center minutes to a degree. He's sort of phased Nasir Little out of that role to a degree. And you can take a look at his last 3 games. He's now got 5 blocks as well. The rebounding's up. He's getting steals and threes consistently. He's an interesting streamer in my mind if you're interested in those cash counter stats. I picked him up in a couple of spots. I think Portland only plays 3 games this week, so schedule-wise it's not terrific, but he's on a lot of wires right now. I think that the block shots are going to continue to trend up for him as long as Giles is out. He's just interesting. He's also consistently hitting the above 30-minute mark, which has also not been a guarantee for him of late. So all those factors considered, he's an interesting streamer in my mind and the guy I'm going to be watching the most tonight, aside from the Robert Covington experience, which continues to be a ton of fun at the moment. So what about you, Brent? Any other names that you're keeping an eye on here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally agree with Covington and Derek Jones Jr. I mean, even Miles Turner's looking at them and going, wow, that's a lot of blocks.
He's taking some notes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Derek Jones Jr.'s fantasy game because he really, from a guy who qualifies at shooting guard, small forward, really brings those center type of stats and those elusive steal stats that we're always all over Melton about. But on top of that, you get the steals and the blocks and pretty decent scoring and pretty good efficiency from him too. He can knock down the threes. He grabs rebounds. I think he's finally bulking up a little bit, which is helping with his crazy athletic ability. So, he probably needs to put on a little more weight before they shift him on too many big guys and play him too much down there. But they really don't have to put him down there. It's like, what are you going to play Carmelo Anthony at center? I mean, he's the least athletic guy on the team, even though he's tall. I'd rather have Derek Jones Jr. down there playing. So they're running with those 2 guys. And if they're available anywhere, grab them now because this train's over as soon as they get their centers back. But right now, enjoy it while it lasts. And I think they both maintain value for the rest of the year. So they may lose a little bit on the block side and the rebound side, but those 2 can make up for it in other areas once the big guys are back. And hopefully it keeps their minutes high when the other guys get back. But yeah, I think you covered it for Portland. Otherwise, it's the names we know for them. But those are the 2 guys I'm excited about who might be available out there.
Nice.
Yeah, and on the Phoenix Suns side, not really any big injuries going on with them at all. I'm kind of watching that, I guess, power forward rotation with Crowder and Saric and Cam Johnson, whatever, that wing forward hybrid thing, whatever Saric is. So they're sort of, leeching off each other, which is a little bit frustrating. Kaminsky, too, seems to be doing that. Paul, Booker, Ayton are your solid guys. Bridges, of course. Bridges seems to be one of those guys I get a lot of questions about. He seems to have greater name value right now than I think he does actual fantasy value. I've seen people being able to cash in on him to get a lot of big name guys who are really solid fantasy contributors. So if you have Bridges, it may be worth just seeing what people think about him around your league and seeing what you could get for him. But I mean, otherwise, a solid guy to have on your team. But yeah, other than those main 4 guys, I can't get too excited about the other guys. They just alternate good games. And that's the worst thing from a fantasy perspective is throwing Saric out there when he gets 10 minutes and then, you drop him, pick up someone and then in the next game he gets, 30 minutes and scores 25 points. So it's just one of those frustrating rotations and not a lot of excitement out of that big 4.
Yeah, totally agree on the Phoenix side. It's really just that power forward rotation. You hit the nail on the head. It's tough to trust on a game-to-game basis. I'm not in that business. I'm out of that business. I was looking at Cam Johnson for a period of time, but now that Sarge is back and Kaminsky has a role in that rotation, it's just a crapshoot, and you're better off looking elsewhere for consistency in production of that sense. So we'll move on. We'll move on ahead to the Hornets visiting the Utah Jazz. Charlotte's side, we're on Scary Terry watch, not just because he has been absolutely amazing in February, really ever since LaMelo Ball entered the starting lineup. He's been the 5th best player in 9 category leagues in February on a per game basis and through 7 games. And he's just getting it done in a ton of different areas. Obviously, scoring is his forte. He's been shooting really hot. He's been really hot recently. So, there's some unsustainable stuff going on there. But, people are very interested in his rest of season outlook, whether or not he could be a top 25, top 30 guy potentially. And I'm not here to tell you that it's not possible. I mean, especially considering that this trend that we've been watching out of him recently has a direct correlation to a lineup switch. That's kind of a positive thing generally. I mean, LaMelo has really unlocked a lot of different guys in that rotation. Miles Bridges is another one who they have a nice rapport. But I think just playing alongside a natural facilitator, not that Devontae Graham wasn't, but I think LaMelo is just a step above him. Yeah. All right. Well, I was trying to go easy on my guy Devontae, but Brent's not having that. So we'll just glide past that. We'll glide past that one.
It is what it is. But and he is a game time decision tonight, from what I see.
Good point.
Graham.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting what effect that has on the rotation once he's back. I think it will have minimal effect. I think it will mostly affect Monk, if anything, and Monk's little hot streak right now. I think it'll cut into his extra time that he's been getting. Mm-hmm. So, I think Monk's probably worth hanging on to if you have him in a deeper league or competitive league or whatever, just to see what happens. But I would be a little bit worried because I don't think Rozier or Ball's playing time is going anywhere.
Absolutely,
so it's got to come out of somewhere, and I think that's Monk's extra time that he's been getting.
I completely agree, and we've seen in the few games that since LaMelo's been elevated to the starting lineup that Rozier and Graham have been healthy at the same time. It's mostly been Graham who's been out, but James Borrego is trying to find ways for those three to play at the same time. It'll be interesting to see if Graham can hold on to enough minutes to even warrant ownership, roster ability in 9-cat leagues as is, because we already know the percentage issue. If his minutes are depleted and he's not as involved with the starters as much, we might see his best stats, the assists, even come down as well. And at that point, he might be in cut territory. Honestly, it's going to be an interesting, which seems kind of crazy. I know people were drafting him in the top 100 this year. And the counting stats are very prolific, but if we're just being honest, in 9-category leagues, he hasn't had the most friendly game. And LaMelo's got the leg up, and he's by no means losing that starting job. So that will be an interesting dynamic to watch whenever Graham is able to play.
Well, the hard part, Alan, to predict about that is you would think the three could play together because LaMelo is such a big guard. He could kind of play that wing. But the problem is he's not really great off the ball. Like LaMelo, like his name says, he needs the ball. And Rozier and Graham are almost better off the ball. But size-wise, that hurts you defensively against a lot of teams. Yeah. So maybe on defense, they could have Ball guard the bigger guy and then he's still the ball handler coming up, but that affects your transition offense and all of that too. So there's a lot of factors that make it difficult for the three of them to play together. It was a little more friendly for maybe a Monk or someone to be in there, but I don't know. We'll see, but you're right. I think Devontae is going to be borderline cut if he doesn't come out and hit more consistently, because that field goal percentage is a killer, especially with a chucker like Graham, who has never seen a shot he didn't like. So it's it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think both Graham and Monk could be near the chopping block territory, just hurting each other when it's all said and done.
And very interesting dynamic. And, maybe Devontae ends up being a trade candidate as we get closer to the deadline. That's something to watch as well. Or
Monk, one of those two.
Or I think. Honestly, either of those two would make sense. I mean, Monk was out of the rotation before Graham really went out. I mean, he's been able to maintain it because of the injuries to Graham and Rozier. But those are two names to watch. I feel like if Charlotte's looking to buy at the deadline, and it's very possible that they will.
And there's a lot of rumors that they're really active in that center trade market or the center market, whether it's Cousins or Drummond or whoever. So, that Cody Zeller fun ride might be coming to an end pretty soon. And if they're going to make a trade for a center, I would think Graham or Monk or both would probably be one of the centerpieces of that trade, potentially with like a Bridges or something. To be able to get someone like a Drummond. So we'll see what shakes out. But I roll with Rozier for sure, who's on fire. He killed my Warriors the other night after Draymond's. I got to bring it up, but after Draymond's, he already cost us a championship with his temper, and now he cost us this game, which we should have come back and won without Curry. And I think Rozier scored like 10 points in less than a minute in that fourth quarter. It was crazy. So.
Xander McGrady came out.
Yeah, it was. Or Reggie Miller in his 8 seconds against the Knicks. Like it was a historic less than a minute there for Rozier, and just painful to watch as a fan of the other team, but awesome to watch as a fan of basketball. But I'm really impressed with Rozier and what he's done and proven people wrong, because Hornets got a lot of crap for signing with that big contract, that he wasn't a start. He was getting starter money and probably wasn't a starting point guard. He's a starting NBA point guard, and good for him. He's really proved it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how he continues to develop like that down the road. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your Charlotte's Hornet Corner. Charlotte's Hornet Corner.
Yeah, who knew I was such a Hornet stan? Every time we talk about it, I get excited. But
yeah, you came for his jugular.
I'm not a Graham fan when it comes to fantasy basketball. I was excited for how he came out of nowhere. That was cool, and what he did. But from a fantasy perspective, he's such a killer in certain categories. It's tough to get behind it, especially now though with Ball, and the team saw it too, or they wouldn't have drafted Ball.
Good point.
So the Jazz, I mean, another team to get super excited about, the hottest team in basketball easily. They were doing that without Conley, who is back now playing. So it'd be interesting to see how Connolly affects the rotation with Ingles and Boyan and those guys, and how it affects the chemistry of the team. Obviously Conley's a veteran. He was playing great up until he got hurt. So I think he's going to still be great. I think it hurts Ingles probably the most, but Ingles got hot, and I think maybe the confidence boost he got from that can keep it rolling. So I wouldn't bail on him just yet, but if a few bad games, and he might be back to droppable territory. But I'd hang on to him and see how things shake out. Otherwise, with the Jazz, nothing crazy to talk about. Boyan has been up and down all year and a little bit frustrating to own, but seemed to improve his assist stats a little bit, which is nice, but he's been inconsistent. And Royce O'Neal, another interesting guy you mentioned, who, can have 0 points and 10 rebounds and 2 blocks kind of games. So he's definitely ownable. But yeah, definitely not like a sexy guy to have. So with the Jazz, I think they're a much better real life team than they are a fantasy team, other than Conley and Mitchell and Gobert. Yeah. But even Mitchell's frustrating to own from a fantasy perspective, because he feels like he should be better than he is, which is always based on where you have to draft him for what you actually get. But yeah, no crazy insights on Utah. Just see what Conley coming back, how that affects everybody.
Agreed. Yeah. I had one note on the Utah thing for the notes I prepared before the show, and that was Royce O'Neal is rostered in 33% of Yahoo leagues, and it should be higher than that. So
it should. Yep.
It just should. I mean, like you said, it's not going to pop off in the scoring column, but that's not his job. That's not his gig. He'll get it done for you with the rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, threes. He really is capable of producing in any of those particular categories, especially threes and steals. So that's really it on the Utah side of things. Quick shout out again to the HoopBall YouTube page, guys. If you are just tuning in, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps us with growth. It helps us create more content. We're having a lot of fun here recently. We want to keep that going. So any support that you could show, that is the greatest way to do that. Drop a like, please subscribe. Follow Brent and I on Twitter too for more direct fantasy analysis from the two of us. And also, real quick, just to circle things back to a previous team we covered, Kristaps Porzingis has been ruled out tonight. So he's out. Probably going to see some smaller lineups with maybe some DFS at power forward. Maybe we see Maxi Kleber play some power forward with one of those, with Powell or Willie Cauley-Stein at the middle. Remains to be seen. But yeah, that's your mid-show update on that. Well, I guess not mid. We have one show left. One game left tonight. The Washington Wizards visiting the Los Angeles Lakers.
This exciting one.
Barn burner tonight. Washington side of things, there are no real injuries to make note of, aside from the ones that have been long-standing. Davis Bertans is the guy that I'm mostly keeping an eye on. He was he had 2 games where he went absolutely nuts from 3. We've seen him get some more minutes at center too, here and there, which is good for his value in general, helps with the rebounds. Just getting him on the floor more often. But he did cool off considerably in his last game. I believe it was on Saturday. down to like 20% shooting from the floor. So I'm just watching to see if he can sort of continue to tap into those that shooting stretch that he had for that 2-game period where he was going on fire. I still think as far as like a regression towards the mean type of deal, he should be hitting more threes the more that we go through this season. He's been below all of his career marks from that area in general. So I still think that he has a nice rosier outlook rest of season than he's had up to this point. But
for sure,
that's really it. And I am, again, going on record, I do not care at all about any of those other centers in Washington. I'm done. I don't care. I know Mo Wagner is interesting. I don't care. Yeah. He's not reliable.
But Alex Len, Alan.
I've gone through the Alex Len experience. All right. I made a passionate argument that he might be the modern center that you'd want because he developed a 3-point shot in Atlanta. I was wrong, and I will continue to be wrong if I ever go back to that well. Don't care. And if you're trying to
Brooke Lopez,
if you guys are trying to care about the Washington center rotation, I would recommend devoting that attention elsewhere. Brent, am I going too hard on that center rotation, or am I on the money?
No, it's that frustrating. I mean, anyone who's watching fantasy knows it's impossible to predict. The fact that Mo Wagner could go from scoring 25 points to getting 3 minutes the next game, it's like, okay, I give up. I totally get it. I think of all of them, I said this in the show I was in the other day. I think Alex Len is probably the safest from a fantasy perspective most nights, but with Wagner being the most exciting of the three, and with Lopez probably having the best floor. So that's a fantasy expert talk of saying avoid this situation at all costs, because I literally have no idea what's going to happen. So I just make up ways to talk about them. I think you're spot on with that. And as far as Washington goes, Bertans is the only thing outside of Westbrook and Beal that's even somewhat interesting. Avidya has if I even say that right, it has a fantasy friendly game. And I have him in a 16 or 20 team league, and I'm pretty happy about that, but it's it's the inconsistencies of a rookie season that are frustrating. So deeper leagues, but anywhere else, I would move on. As far as the lake, I can hit up Jed's. I just caught Jed's question out of the corner of my eye. Which two of these four are a hold and 9-cat? Pirtle, Time Lord, Olynyk, Noel? I would say hold Pirtle and Time Lord for sure if you only could pick two of the four. I think Olynyk's a hold too. Noel, he had his chance. But I like Pirtle and Time Lord rest of the season probably, even though I did see that Aldridge was back at practice today. But he's old, looks super slow and terrible, and a hip injury is nothing to joke about. So that's something that could easily keep him out more time the rest of the year. So I think Pirtle is a good hold. And Time Lord, man, even in his 20 minutes is looking legit. So as soon as Boston wises up and gets him more than 20 minutes, he played the entire overtime yesterday and looked great. Next to Tice, they played him next to Tice in that overtime. So I think Time Lord is on his way up, and I think the buy low period on him is over.
I agree on Robert Williams. He's definitely made some inroads, but I will push back a little bit on Nerlens Noel. I think he's the number one guy for me, just because the minutes are still
those
there.
Four? Okay.
Yeah. The defensive stat. I know that the box score hasn't been all that impressive, but I don't see his role going anywhere. I know that Tom Thibodeau's been experimenting with some small ball lineups with Randall in practice. But look, Noel is a block. He's going to be near the top of the league in blocks as long as Mitchell Robinson's out. I don't think that that's going to change. I'm still on board with him. As far as defensive stats go, efficiency goes, low turnovers, he's a 9-cat superstar. But
careful.
But you know what? I'd say that he is certainly the biggest hold on my mind. That's just my opinion. You can take that as you will. But Robert Williams definitely deserves some attention given the recent nice stretch of play, even with the other two guys back.
Yeah, honestly, I'd like to have all four of those guys. So if you can hang on to them, I guess Pirtle's the most on the edge, though. He's looked great with Aldridge out, but if Aldridge comes back, he definitely takes a big hit. So Allen's right. Opportunity usually rules in fantasy, and Noel has that overall of all those four. So that's a really good point. Yeah. Well, so the Lakers, I guess, is the last team here to talk about in this matchup. No, I mean, I guess obviously Anthony Davis, Kuzma is a game time decision, so that's going to be really interesting. If he ends up sitting, I don't know if Alan, you see any updates on that? And I see Morris is a game time decision too.
Yeah, Kuzma's just probable as far as I know.
Okay, so Kuzma's going to play. Love Kuzma right now from a fantasy perspective. As long as Davis is out, he seems to have, he's found his inner Dennis Rodman, I think, from a rebounding perspective. Not just the hair, but the rebounding too, and the off-court antics. He's got it all. He's trying to he's the next Dennis Rodman. I said it here. That's our hot take. Kyle Kuzma.
That's an interesting one.
Nowhere near as good as Dennis Rodman ever was in his prime. Just trying to figure out any way to talk about this Lakers team outside of LeBron James with Schroeder out. I think Montrezl Harrell is going to be good. He had 15 minutes the other night, but that was really matchup based, and he made up for it this last game. And I think he'll continue to do well. The lack of blocks from Harrell is always frustrating because it feels like you should get more than, I think he averages 0.6 blocks a game. You really want your center to average at least 1 or 0.9, but his efficiency his everything's great. Field goal, free throws, rebounds, blocks are really good with Harrell, and he gets steals too to make up for some of the lacking in the block. So I like Harrell right now. Wild cards, in my opinion, are like Horton Tucker, but him and Caruso are kind of hurting each other there from a fantasy perspective. So really, with all these guys out, it's Kuzma, it's Harrell, and of course LeBron. But outside of that, really hard to get excited about any of these Laker guys. Hopefully Schroeder gets back quick because I have him in a lot of spots because I was high on him this year, and that's exactly why they don't have anyone else. They needed Schroeder from an offensive perspective. Yeah. So any thoughts on the Lakers, Alan?
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on Schroeder being out with health and safety protocols because he was seeing the largest usage bump without Anthony Davis in the lineup. And now without, those two guys, the Lakers are down 2 of their 3 highest usage players. You're going to see a lot more opportunity thrown Kyle Kuzma's way. He definitely took a lot of shots, and that there's been 2 games without Schroeder. We've already seen the usage go up. It seems that Wes Matthews is going to be absorbing a lot more minutes in the rotation in that regard, which is unfortunate. I would hope that Alex Caruso might have seen that bump, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be the case necessarily in a vacuum. Caruso does have interesting upside, but that's only so far as if he's playing into the 20s, and at the moment he's capped pretty right at that cusp. Caruso and Taylor Horton Tucker, like you touched on, become more interesting. We enter blowout territory. That seems to be when those two get their most opportunities. Caruso's a part of the rotation anyway. Tucker is not really, unless it's a blowout situation, at least from a reliable standpoint. So going up against the Wizards, I don't know. I know the Lakers are undermanned, but Washington's still not that good. Nothing. I think we touched on everything, though. LeBron, as far as a waiver pickup is concerned, it's still Kyle Kuzma. I doubt he's on anyone's wires, though, because of the name recognition and because, just as soon as the Davis news hit last week, he was swooped up anywhere he wasn't already rostered. Yeah. So that's the deal there. That's all we've got today. I know we went a little over because we had a lot of thoughts on Charlotte Hornets, but I'm glad that we got that out. It seems like we had some stuff we had to get off of our chests there. I'm
gonna go hang my my Hornets posters right next to my grandmama throwback Hornets poster. Yeah, exactly. I will. So I hope that y'all enjoyed our show today. As always, we're trying to roll these out at least 5 days a week for the weekdays. I know we got a show in on the weekend too, so that's pretty cool. You can expect this kind of stuff from the HoopBall YouTube channel going forward. Again, please drop a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you like this content and other content that we are producing over here. Follow Brent and I on Twitter, and follow the HoopBall Fantasy Twitter page. That's at HoopBall Fantasy, all put together. Best place to get breaking news updates with fantasy analysis at once. So that is all the good stuff there. Enjoy the games tonight, guys. We'll check in with you tomorrow with whoever we got hosting the show. I'm pretty sure William Harris, our guy, is going to be doing that show. So watch out for him. We will we'll catch y'all later. Take it easy, everyone. Have a good night.